Hi. So yesterday, folks, we talked a lot about, if you remember, the German guy introduced the concept of the World War One, and talked about a whole bunch of things like ideas, uniting German-speaking people, arms races, alliances, self-determination, crises. Those are the kinds of things that we said led the European nations to World War One, and eventually drove the United States into World War One. Today, we're going to take a more in-depth look at what the United States is doing here at home. How are we preparing and getting ready to go to war? Now, there are a couple different reasons why we're able to go to war as a country, and we're able to go to war in part because we can pay for it. We have the strongest economy in the world, don't forget, right? We have the largest gross national product. And that allows us, as it says right here in the upper right, boop, 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 for us to be able to actually pay for this. Our economic strength is such that our country is going to be able to actually bear the cost, the actual physical, or I should say economical cost of this war. And there's a couple different ways our country is going to do that. A couple different ways that our country is going to be able to pay for this war. One of them is going to be called the War Industries Board, because think about all the stuff that a war takes to actually make happen. If you're going to actually produce the tanks, the guns, the bullets, everything else that you need to produce a war, somebody's got to do all of that. And someone's got to make sure that it happens in a reasonable way, in a fast way. So the War Industries Board is going to be the group that does that. And government in Washington, D.C. says, all right, what are the key resources around the world that we need to be, or around the world that we need to gather, bring to our country, and make into war supplies? So the War Industries Board gathers all of these resources. It says what's out there: oil, coal, aluminum, steel, whatever. It brings it to our country and says, okay, who's going to get it? This factory gets this factory gets that factory gets that. This allows the government to set the price for the good that it's buying. Because let's face it, if the government doesn't set the price, instead of charging what it's worth, maybe with a little profit, those companies are going to charge ridiculous amounts of money and really hurt our country's economy in an attempt to make a profit off of this war. So the War Industries Board's design is to make sure that we're supporting our troops, that we're producing an army capable of winning, but that we're not going to bankrupt ourselves trying to pay for this war that's being fought over in Europe. The other thing that we're going to do here, and you can see them on this slide, is our government's going to sell something called a Liberty Bond. And the way it works is pretty simple. Our government says, hey, we need your money. So you, being a very patriotic American, loan the government right now $1. Good job, you. And as you loan the government that dollar, it's going to spend it on whatever it needs to spend it on for the war. And then what's going to happen is time is going to pass, I don't know, let's say 20 years, right? 20 years pass, and then you get from the government $2 back. It's an investment. You give money now, time passes, you get more money later. That more money, by the way, that you're getting, that's called interest. It's called interest. So you make a profit off this war, but it also helps our country pay for this war, which is one of the reasons why we're able to go to war, because we can afford it as a country. We can actually afford the fight itself. The other big reason why we're able to go to war is that we're actually able to convert this money, convert this economy that we have into the actual labor that we need to produce the stuff, and an economy capable of making this stuff. You can have all the money in the world, but if you can't make anything, it doesn't do you any good, right? You need the stuff. We have the labor force capable of making this material, and we've got the economy capable of producing large amounts of it. So you can see down here, right beneath me, a couple of different ways our government's going to use its influence to keep our labor force happy. One of them is called the National War Labor Board, and the idea there is pretty simple. If you've got a company that's out here, a company that is, I don't care what it's making, it can be making whatever it wants to make, right? You've got a company, it's over here and it's making whatever. But unfortunately, it really, really, really treats its workers bad. Oh, sad face, me, then those workers aren't going to work so hard now. No, they're not. And they're not going to make a lot of stuff for the war. So the National War Labor Board comes along and says, hey, give those workers better pay. Give those workers better conditions, man. What are you doing? We need those materials for the war. It's going to use its influence to help turn that frown upside down to create happy workers. Happy workers make more. We're also going to see more and more women pulled into these factories as well. So we'll see more and more women that are out there joining the workforce to make these goods, something a lot of other countries won't do. We're also going to see that America, for the first time, really opens its companies up to large numbers of African American employees. This is a big deal because prior to this, remember, most African Americans are stuck sharecropping in the South. Now, with World War I, we're going to have something called the beginnings of the Great Migration. And that's a really important concept. And the Great Migration lasts from about 1916 to about 1930, and then there's a second Great Migration later. But what happens here are large numbers of African Americans fleeing sharecropping and heading north to these industrial cities. And they're heading north to all of these cities to work in these wartime factories. This is going to allow African Americans a better chance at a way different kind of life, and it's going to help our factories produce more than before when it comes to actual World War I needed items. This gives us a really popular and really strong labor force because they're happy. National War Labor Board, we've got lots of replacement workers and women who've replaced the white males, and we have lots of African Americans who replace those white males moving north as well. I want to set that up because after World War I, all those white soldiers who left their jobs to go fight in Europe, they're going to come home. And they're going to find a lot of women and a lot of African Americans in their jobs. Now the women, most of them are going to return to their previous jobs. The question is, what are those African Americans going to want to do? And we'll talk about that shortly.